Jefferson. I'm your chair, appointee for Ward 4.
Ms. Jefferson, can you please press your mic button, please? Mic button right in front.
It wasn't on the whole
No,
time?
ma'am, it doesn't.
Okay. Okay, so let's start this again. Welcome, College Park. Welcome to our College Park Business and Industrial Development Authority Board meeting. Today is April the 13th. I call the meeting at 6:33 p.m. We shall begin with our roll call with our BIDA members as well as mayor and council and any guests. My name is Celissa Jefferson. I am your chair for appointee Ward 4.
My name is Anita Brown-Cadis. I am Vice Chair, appointee Ward 3.
Lisa Parker, Secretary's Treasurer, Ward 2.
Jamel McKenzie, and I am the Ward 1 appointee.
Ambrose Clay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Bianca Motley Broom, Mayor.
Ken Allen, Ward 3. Councilman.
Joe Karn, City Councilman.
Stanley Hawthorne, City Manager.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mercedes Miller, the Executive Director for the fabulous Georgia International Convention Center, the Gateway Arena at College Park, and the College Park Historic Golf Course. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Camber, Project Manager with Economic Development.
Good evening. I'm Michelle Alexander, Executive Director for BIDA.
Leslie Zen, BIDA.
Dan Lee, attorney for BIDA.
Sabretha Beasley, Administrative Assistant to Economic Development, and also the Assistant Secretary Treasurer of BIDA.
Brecca Carter, guest.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Let's begin by the review and the approval of our minutes. Does anyone have any changes?
Madam Chair, I did submit several changes. They were incorporated.
Okay, great. Is there anyone else with any changes? Okay, if
I'd like to move that we adopt the minutes with the revisions that have been made from March 9th.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion
Aye.
passes unanimously. Next, we have the additions, deletions, amendments, or changes to the agenda.
Madam Chair, in review of the agenda and the items, I see that under administrative updates, there are actually 4 different items, and I would like to suggest that for 2 of those items, and if you want me to go into detail,
Okay.
it's item 4AB, titled the buyers, well, let's start with 4AC, the Administrative Standard Operating Procedures for City and BIDA-owned real estate, and item B, the Buyer's Guide, that we table those pending further internal review. I realize they are administrative items or updates, so I'm also open to a brief review of them and then a decision about some action. But I would like to table it for internal discussion.
Okay.
Point of clarification, Dr. Cadis. Are you saying that what is your suggestion? I mean, what are you asking that we do, just for clarification?
Well, they're quite extensive documents. They've never been presented to us before. I feel that, I'm not sure if are we voting to approve them, to accept them? I have a feeling that the review would be quite intense and extensive, and I think it requires some internal review before presentation to the board.
Well, then I move that we remove those items from the agenda and that we have an internal review before we bring them back up.
Okay,
Oh, then I second it, but I was just trying to get clarification, so then I'm seconding what
Oh,
you're
wait.
saying.
What is exactly an internal review?
Okay.
It's a review of the material that's being presented. When I say internal review, we've talked before about standard operating procedures, et cetera, and having a working group to work on those. This is the very first time I've seen them with no discussion. We can discuss it. Yeah, by internal review, I feel like it needs some work before, if we're, especially if we're voting to adopt them as our internal procedures. There's no vote.
I do agree with Dr. Cadis on this one.
Well, this is an opportunity to give input. I mean, I found a couple of minor things.
I found some major things. We can discuss it.
Okay.
We'll leave it for discussion.
okay, which item do you want to leave for discussion?
Well, both documents be contained in B and C.
Okay, so we're voting to leave in for discussion 4AB and 4B.
4AB and 4AC.
4AC.
is the buyer's
Okay.
procedure guide, and 4AC is the administrative standard operating procedures for city and BIDA-owned real estate.
Exactly.
So
There's no change.
There's no
However, I have a new business that I would like to add.
Madam Chair, so
Yes.
Dr. Case, you withdraw the motion.
I withdraw my motion.
Okay, thank you. Okay. New business I would like to add under administrative updates. So we have two items, A and B. I would like to add C, affiliate business agreement. D, the approval for the electronic signature service. E, our procedure to have signing instructions from the real estate attorney.
Madam Chair, where are you suggesting?
I'm adding it under new business. So we already have A for administrative updates and then B. So I'm adding C for affiliate business agreement. D for the approval of electronic signature service. E for closing attorney signing instructions. F to discuss our attendance sheet and again, just reiterate the virtual online policy. For clarification, 4C, were you referring to the RFQ?
No, that's 4D. Oh,
That's 4D, okay. 4D was remaining, okay.
So everything's remaining.
Yes, everything's, yes, I understand.
Madam Chair,
I was just getting clarification there.
Madam Chair, have we received electronic copies of these items? They weren't in the packet.
Yes, as far as the new business, no, this is discussion for new business for these.
So there's no
topics that I'm
material,
adding.
there's no
material, exactly.
material, okay.
This is discussion.
Okay.
For these new items. Where did I leave off at? The attendance policy, and then, the last, item would be the, I think I think this is what 4C was the SOP goals. Is that what that was?
No,
There is no 4C.
there's no 4C. You added 4C.
4C right now is affiliate business agreement.
No, I'm sorry, 4D.
That's electric signature approval.
Okay, so
Electronic,
then,
excuse me.
okay, great. So then G, I would like to add discussion on the SOP and goals. Strategic meeting. Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the additions to the agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank
Madam
you.
Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but we do have a quorum of council here, but we are not conducting council business tonight.
Exactly, so
And
we.
so there
exactly.
is no vote being taken amongst council. Of
Exactly.
course, I will be voting as a member of VITA.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This is not a joint meeting, it's a regular session meeting, but we're glad to have a full quorum of council here. Okay, let's move on to our administrative updates.
Right, thank you. I'll be behind the curtain, the man
Okay.
behind the curtain.
Okay.
Nothing to see here, right?
Yes.
Good evening, welcome everybody. Our first item isn't actually listed. I meant for the first item to be a warm welcome and introduction to Stanley Hawthorne, our new city manager. He's officially on day 9.
Thank you.
Yes.
Welcome.
We appreciate you being here. We did explain and give an orientation about VITA to Mr. Hawthorne, about the joint meetings that are 4 times a year and our regular meetings. We're glad to see you here. I didn't know if you wanted to say a word or two. You are invited to do so.
Well, good evening again. It's a pleasure to be here. And actually, I will say as far as orientation over the past 3 days, I believe on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. These days are running together already in the 9 business days. Staff did give me an overview, had a chance to meet with Michelle and Ben and VITA's attorney and financial advisor. And then the chair graciously set up a meeting and introduced herself. I've had a chance to meet some of the other board members. Happy to see those of you I haven't met yet, but look forward to working with you. Today, we took a tour of a development in Atlanta to get some ideas and maybe even, I guess, a prospective partner that you may consider in the future. So I know how important this agency is. I certainly have worked with redevelopment agencies and authorities and other communities that I've worked. So invaluable, the work that you do. So thanks for having me.
Thank you.
The next item, you do have in your packet the attendance report.
Yes.
I don't have it for review unless there's questions related to that. The next item we have in your packet is the purchaser guide for disposition. So this is a guide, and I'm happy to bring it up if you'd like to review some of the key items. I have it available on, here on the screen. This was, we did present both of these drafts. I know we met with, you had a subcommittee when I first started, a subcommittee to review procedures. And we drafted these 2 documents. It was in a packet that we had prepared, maybe it was in a packet maybe 3 months back. And we just have made some updates to it. And the other document is the administrative SOPs. So I'm trying to exit out so I can bring them up so you can at least see some. Let's see if I can do this. I apologize for my delay of, good, we just have the packet. So we, I'm sorry, it'll take me another second. Oh, I have to hit share, new share? This one? Agenda. Is it showing?
Click share.
Are we live? So these were two documents. These are administrative documents. And I think there might be a point of order. There's an understanding that these would be adopted by the board, and I'm not sure. That's your purview to adopt. I'm just going to defer to Dan Lee if administrative procedures are typically adopted. It seems safer to do so to make sure everyone's agreeing upon them, and we can. And I hear the request to not consider for adoption, and I only understood for presentation. So we can bring them back next time. Well, it sounds like we will bring them back next time because you have direction for us. I'm checking with Dan Lee if these need to be adopted via a motion by the board.
I haven't seen them. I don't know what they apply to or.
And so I think our concern, Michelle, was that because the document, although we did a high-level review at one point in time last year, but we really haven't gone through and kind of worked out line by line. And
what's it mean? How does that work? Okay.
Which ones, so I think that is probably best for us to table the item or add it into our workshop that we can agree to have to work through the SOP. Our SOP, our goal was to take it through a Six Sigma process. And this first initial creation of it is the first part. But there are, 4, although it's Six Sigma, but there are 4 core other items that are related to validating the information and making sure that the process actually works. So we just kind of want to walk through those steps and kind of, create, we have the guidance, but now it's time for us to review them thoroughly and have a thorough discussion before adoption takes place.
Great, that's helpful. This is the first I've heard that we're going through this review process. So will you provide the specific Sigma review items for everyone?
Yes, so the purpose was for you to provide us this guidance, which we have now. And so then we would have to schedule when if it's going to be a strategic planning meeting or if it's going to be a goals workshop, so to speak, we would have to determine what date that would be and create a workshop discussion around it.
Well, I'm sorry that I'm very confused, and I apologize, because my experience is preparing administrative procedures to share and show how we're executing the policy. So normally I would get policy directive, but on the administrative, we would share with you the procedures and you'd hold us accountable to them. And I also I'm still checking when you mentioned a certain methodology. You said there's a 6-step process, the Six Sigma, and staff wasn't aware that you were wanting us to use that as our review process. This is brand new. So will you provide that to staff, that methodology? And does the whole board want us to do that? Or
exactly, and it could have been just an oversight because we did it last year. We had provided it to the former economic development director, and so, city manager.
The method for creating procedures.
Yes, exactly.
And actually, Mayor?
Sure.
And I think that was my concern, that what we have here is an administrative manual, and that really has very little to do with the process of improvement that we're looking at. We have a number of issues here. We're involved in litigation. We have complaints that we're difficult to deal with. We have lots of properties sitting and going through a process, and we felt very strongly, and this was probably a good year ago, that we talked about implementing a Lean Six Sigma or a Six Sigma process review of 2 of our procedures. One is leading up to the letter of intent or interest, and the second is the process of going through, creating and going through a PSA.
Do you want her microphone on?
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, your microphone was cut.
Okay. And I'm prepared.
Now you get the 5-cent version.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
And that's wise. I mean, I really appreciate, and coming in when I first did, we met and jumped on this as soon as, possible.
So we
So
have-
I could, think tonight's a great night for us to walk through. We don't have an executive session, we don't have letters of interest, or contract matters, and so I was prepared to walk through the organization of the document, and would love some insight so we can keep moving forward.
I think that would be premature at this point. We have 2 Greenbelt Lean Six Sigma people here certified, and the process is really quite intensive, requires a number of metrics. What you've done quite successfully now is to lay out the administrative procedures for the 2 processes out of the many that we're interested in looking at. But it also requires metrics and measurement and looking over things that we'd like to develop that process, as we've been trying to do for the past year, so that we can correct some of the things that we as VITA are charged with.
So I think I hear you better now. You're talking about operational performance and all the areas of improvement.
We're talking about a process. We're talking about the process performance of getting people from having an interest in VITA properties to signing the PSA. And it's a multi-step process, and evidently we are not doing as well as we should be. But to know what we need to change, we need to look at what it is right now. And you've laid out a great roadmap for what you and your staff do in making this process unfold. But we need a much more structured approach to the assessment of that. And that's what we proposed. Thank you for doing what you did. This puts it down on paper, some of it, but what we'd like to do now is in a workshop session or something, create a working group that will now begin to implement the Six Sigma process, to look at it so that we can see why is it that we have the problems that we have.
Yes, and then we also want to, refer to our attorney as well to make sure nothing is, conflicting our charter. So we want to be, have the time and then take the due diligence to review this thoroughly to make sure that we are in compliance with our charter. And since Attorney Danley, you have you had it? Yeah, so he hasn't seen it, so I would rather have the workshop so that our attorney can be able to review it, and then we can also review it as well, and then just decide and create some validation and verification processes around it, and to make sure that it's working. And that's a part of the total Six Sigma process.
And the Six Sigma process, the board all has, and you have given to staff, or how do I obtain this method?
No, that's a training.
No, that's
I
a
understand
training.
that. I understand.
They're just certified.
We're just certified.
But you're
in Six
asking me
Sigma.
to participate in the method that I don't have the methodology, nor was I
And
made
that's what-
aware
and- exactly.
until this moment that we were using this method for assessing our administrative procedures. And
It's not really all.
I understand. So pieces of it, though, are this.
Right,
So
exactly.
since these are pieces that will
Yes.
contribute to that, I'm not following, not reviewing the procedures that were what we put on paper. So should I exit out, or do you want to see our procedures that we're asking you to assess through your methodology, I guess?
No, I think that it's fine. I think that review, if there are comments that I would suspect other people here want to comment on what you've written, that's fine. And I do appreciate the thoroughness that's here. It's a great piece of work for going further. It has nothing to do with what you've written or what you do. And so I think at this point say that we should invite comments. I don't need a walkthrough page by page or section by section, but if others have comments on what's written here, I think I would welcome hearing those comments, as I'm sure you would, because this represents a lot of work.
Yes. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes.
Did you have any concerns around the SOP?
There's two.
I applaud what you're talking about doing. I wasn't on BIDA last year, and I wasn't aware that you had decided to do this. Two things, I had some very minor changes, which I can just simply pass to Michelle.
Okay.
Nobody's going to object to them, it just makes them a little bit better.
Got it.
But, so you don't need to do it for me. The only thing that strikes me right now is this is a statement of the current process that we are following. Is that correct, Michelle?
Yes, yes, and it has recommendations. So for example, for the buyer's guide, it has criteria by which we as staff are evaluating and doing the go, no-go. So I do think it has policy implications that you all need to evaluate and give us feedback that this is in fact how you want staff to technically review.
Right. So you are giving them, though, the criteria that you are currently following. I'm just,
yes.
all I'm saying is what you've written here, what we're doing now, and what we have been doing.
I can't speak to what we have been doing, and it hasn't been consistent. And so it needs feedback from the board. So I'm going to say it's a yes and. Yes, your new team that started since August has been using these evaluation criteria. It hasn't been consistent because we've gotten very different avenues of offers, and it hasn't been discussed as a body as a whole. There were 3 of your members who met as a subcommittee, and we reviewed these items. And then I shared it with the body as a whole, but we haven't gone through to discuss the evaluation criteria, and that's what is now up on the screen, of how we're determining a go, no-go, that getting through the gate to get to BIDA, and then to provide BIDA your own score sheet so you all can see, well, staff evaluated and we're giving you a report. What is the proposed use? How will it improve, value? These different questions that are on this criteria that we've spelled out, to my knowledge, have not been spelled out before, so I can't speak to how consistently they've been applied over time.
Okay, let me just ask the question a lot simpler, and that is, if there is no review tonight, no approval tonight, tomorrow, this is the procedure that you're going to be operating under.
Yes, sir.
It is de facto what you are doing now. And
Without
if the
approval,
board wants
yes.
you to do it differently, that
Yes.
will come out of a review and some recommendations for
Yes.
changes and so forth.
Yes.
But we do have an operational procedure,
Yeah.
and we do have a procedure that you intend to follow consistently at
Yes.
this point.
Yes, sir.
So we are not foundering right now. We are going forward. We've got a solid procedure, and which you're going to review and modify as necessary.
Madam Chairman.
Is that correct?
Correct.
That's correct. And I think the worst thing that we could do would be we will never know where our flaws are if we change procedure every time the wind blows. And that's a bit of an exaggeration. So what's very important for evaluating procedures is that we're consistent in our procedure. So this procedure that you presented to us today is the one that you're going to follow. That keep it consistent as much as possible, and that way we'll be able to find out where are the chinks in what we're doing.
Yeah.
So we know some of the issues that have been a problem, but right now we really need to drill down and find out how can we make this better. The whole issue is process improvement and better outcomes. That's our bottom line.
And making sure that we don't have any conflicts with our current charter.
Could you share some of the issues that y'all have already identified?
Well, for instance, the amount of time and the number of back and forths that we had to work through a PSA, the amount of time the fact that we've got some lawsuits means that something did not go right in our process. I'm sure we did not set ourselves up to have these lawsuits. And if it's anything that we did, we need to know that. So those would be 2 things right there. I think that the reputation that we have of College Park or BIDA or both being difficult to deal with. It might be a myth, it might be a fantasy, it might be a reality, but as long as we're operating under that cloud, your LOIs and your PSA tracking forms, those are very informative. When I look through and see, you know, from point A to point B to point C, that tracking in and of itself tells us a lot about just how long it takes to get from point A to point B. That's a metric. And if we say we want to cut that in half, we have to know what it is that we're doing that makes it twice as long as it needs to be. So those are just small examples of how our process, and we are a process organization, we're not city council. We're, you know, so everything we do relies on our process and being successful in that, having successful outcomes. And right now, we don't know. We don't even know if those myths are true. But if they are, we need to find out why they're happening.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I had one thing, if I may.
Sure.
I guess some of this stuff obviously is gonna float downhill to us at some point or another. You know, when you're looking at proposals and whatnot in general, it usually isn't a one-size-fits-all in all of the criteria. I think you need to have some basic standards, but you gotta give yourself enough latitude for assessment. The reason being is you never know what type of proposal that you will get from someone. And if it's missing this or it's not formatted to that or whatever have you, then you may miss out on something. You know, the problem is you could never have a one size for different proposals. That requires analysis of the different contours of that particular offer. So, you know, a set of guidelines that's too restrictive will say, well, we could miss out on a great many proposals that may be something that would be a benefit to the city because, well, we have this criteria that's so restrictive and it's a boilerplate and it says this, that, and the other, everything else is absolutely off the table. You may put yourselves out of opportunities, which is something we don't want to do. All situations are different, but just make sure you put enough latitude in whatever it is you're going to do, where you don't pigeonhole yourself and restrict yourself too much too. So sometimes you can overregulate yourself too. So just keep that in mind.
Understood. Good point. And that basically further speaks to the need for us to review and validate the process. It's not so much that we are creating restrictive criteria. We're just trying to make sure that our processes and procedures are following our policy and that, you know, everything is fully transparent and in full disclosure and everyone is getting the access and opportunity to, you know, submit their proposals accordingly. My only concern also on page 28, when it speaks to the development and growth policy and vision relationship to other entities, it says that the city, mayor, and council determine the vision and direction of the development policy. So that's really broad, and we have to make sure and be cognizant of what our charter states, our position. So we want to make sure there's no conflict of interest there. And we want to take that time, as mentioned previously.
I wanted to bring up that page. It's packet page 28?
Yes,
oh,
package
I'm
page
close.
28.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
Right, and it started with,
no.
I'm going to scroll back down. So
Got
this
it.
is towards the end on basic roles and responsibilities section of it. And we remind the reader about additional activities outside of the transactions and the financial tools, mechanisms. And then we have a statement about the growth and policy and vision and relationship to other entities.
And so that needs further review, and to make sure that our attorney has a copy, he has reviewed it, and then we can further discuss to make sure that there's no conflict of interest with our charter and our bylaws when it comes to.
What conflict of interest?
it says that the mayor and council determines the vision and direction of the development policy. That's a conflict. We have a charter, we have bylaws, but the mayor and city council does not determine that development policy. Our policy is our bylaws, is our charter.
It says here, BIDA's role is limited to fiduciary responsibilities and accountable to implementation of adopted city policies.
Yes, and that needs to be reviewed and measured against our current bylaws. Because the way our bylaws is written, there may be conflict of interest when it comes to these implementation of the city policies. So we are state chartered for a reason. So I just want to make sure our attorney has his review and can give us our advice, and then we will have the opportunity to review it as well and make sure that there is no conflict of interest when it's determining policies and procedures.
So, and I think part of it was to be clear that it's the city policies, the policy for the city, not BIDA's policies. So just to distinguish, this is referring to development and growth policies, the city's development and growth policies, not
So
BIDA's
and
policies.
that's why yes, and that's why we need that further clarification to make sure that there isn't a conflict of interest. But I defer to our attorney.
I think Dan.
Madam Chair, I can speak to that, and when I said I hadn't seen the administrative work that the executive director has done, that's what I meant. This issue, and many times the lawyer's job is to tell you something you don't want to hear, and I think this is going to fall into that category. The charter that created, the legislation that created BIDA controls what BIDA can and cannot do.
Exactly.
BIDA's direction is from the city council. There's a couple of issues tonight that have been added to the agenda that relate to, and these are my words, policing the board, or one of them is attendance. Those issues, as we've seen here, that has been determined before my time, are under the purview of the council, not BIDA. As far as setting a policy of economic development, the statute that created it and then the ballot that was voted on gives to the mayor and council the control over the main purpose of BIDA, and that is to whether or not you can issue bonds. BIDA cannot even set that policy. It comes from the city council. And I would submit to you that is that way all over the state. So first thing I would caution you is to be prepared that this body does not have the autonomy that I'm afraid somebody or some may think you have. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a great purpose. And BIDA has a function here that you won't find in a lot of places because of the land development that you all have chosen to participate in. Most development authorities, and when this development authority was created, I suspect it was not, nobody believed that it would be managing a land development that you have now. And so I would caution you that the policies of how you carry on business, the general policy setting has been done for you by the legislature and the mayor and council. And I know that may not be popular comment, but it is one that I think that this board needs to manage within.
Okay. So, and I thank you, Attorney Lee. My only question there is, in our bylaws in Section 8, when it has additional officers, agents, and employees, it says a majority of the members of the Board of Authority may, from time to time, appoint, select, and employ such officers, agents, and employees as they deem necessary to exercise the authority's powers, duties, and functions as prescribed by the laws of the state of Georgia. With that determination, this board has the authority to function under its bylaws. Now, does that coincide with what the mayor and council may decide, it may not be.
It
But I
cannot-
think we need to be clear on that.
It cannot-
And that's why the standard of operation procedures, we need to have the opportunity to review to make sure that there isn't a conflict of interest with our bylaws.
The bylaws are intended to help interpret and operate the charter. And the bylaws cannot be in conflict with the legislation that created the body. And to that extent, and I would, this is something I always caution clients on, the wording is great, and there's a balance of comparing it to the bylaws to the charter. But at the end of the day, there's a practical application of this too.
Which is
So
true.
the way these two bodies function budget-wise is that the budget of body is the control of the council. So you could have a debate about hiring somebody, but if you don't have the money, it really is not something you can do without the holder of the checkbook signing off on it.
Well, Madam Chair.
Sure.
And I've seen this argument play out for many, many, many years on this board with many, many, many chairs. And I think overall, we all work together pretty well.
Which is true.
I think this is one of the most important years for the authority here. I do believe by the end of the year, we'll probably sell off a majority of this 6 West property if all goes well. That's just my prediction. Sounds like there are two different issues here. First of all, I don't know where this is coming from, but it's two different things. It seems like there's someone's wanting to regulate the board and what you all can do. The second tier is, I think, the real problem. How we serve developers and the issues that they're having. So it's two separate issues. And I'm not one to talk around the problem. So if developers and folks or clients are coming up saying they're having difficulties dealing with the city and developing something, then we need to know what the problems are. That doesn't mean you change all the rules. Well, give us your top 3 issues. Well, here they are. I'm having difficulty when I try to do this. I'm having difficulty with that. I'm having difficulty with A, B, C. And address it that way, not overhaul the whole thing. So at some point, if there is some issues, somebody find out, well, what are the issues? What are they saying they're having difficulty with in terms of dealing with us for process? Find out what those are, and let's start there, and then we can fix those without throwing the baby out with, throwing everything out and reforming everything. It may be 4 or 5 issues that everybody's having. So I would suggest we ask the question, well, tell us what the issues are. We can you bring them to your board and say, well, that sounds like a problem. Well, let's fix this one and check off the other one, and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's, I think you all, everybody works pretty much okay together. We're usually on the same page with stuff, as far as I've seen. But you don't want to overregulate yourselves just for overregulation's sake. But fix the problems. The question is, what are the problems outside folks are having with us?
Exactly.
So if someone can get a list from some of the developers or speculators that are having issues, what are the issues?
Yes.
And maybe you start, that would seem more of a logical place to start from. But that's just my 2 cents.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And I just want to respond, and that is exactly the process that we're
Yes.
talking about implementing. The process improvement is data-driven. It's not just, well, they told me, or we're going to measure the number of days. How many days does it take on average?
Exactly.
And when it takes longer than that, why is that?
Yeah.
There is no way we can speculate, particularly given the short tenure that many of us have, by just asking those questions. We need to look at the metrics. And so exactly what you've described